Hello, everyone, and welcome to Off the Hook with Matty D. I am your host, Matt DiNardo, and you know I love fishing, and I love to try different things. And one of the things I've always thought about trying to do was to chase false albacore on the fly. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to do that down off the coast of North Carolina near Cape Lookout, and I hired a guide by the name of Captain John Mauser from Tailing Tide Guide Service, and it was an exceptional day. And I reached out to him recently and I said, hey, Captain John, would you please come on the show and talk about your fishery? And he graciously said yes. So here he is. Without further ado, there he is, Captain John Mauser. Captain John, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate your time.
You have an exceptional fishery. You're located in the Crystal Coast. Let's kind of give a little background, first of all, about you. When did you start fly fishing and then therefore start guiding after that?
Yeah, actually, my fly fishing went way back. I was born in Virginia Beach, but I've lived in Eastern North Carolina since I was 3 years old. So I grew up in Northeastern North Carolina. Like most kids, start fishing bluegill and bass and stuff like that. When I was about 10 or 12 years old, got my first fly rod at Kmart in the blister pack off the rack. It was probably $30 when Mom bought me, and fished for several years for bluegill and stuff like that, and little popping bugs on lily pads and whatnot. So when I was about 14 years old, my uncles that lived in the Chesapeake Bay area, they got me into striper fishing, speckled trout, redfish, flounder, that type of stuff. And at that point, at like 14 years old, this is the 90s, I had no awareness that you could saltwater fly fish. So the saltwater fly fishing took a back seat to me, or the fly fishing took a back seat to me, and I got focused on saltwater, just spin fishing. So I went to college for marine biology in UNC Wilmington, and then I moved to where I live now in Swansboro, North Carolina, on the Crystal Coast. And once I got up there, in the first couple of months I was up here, I met a gentleman who was really wrapped up in saltwater fly fishing. He got me hooked up into it and caught my first fish within a few months, which was actually a mahi on fly. And then it was, just downhill from there. And I've just continued to build that passion and do a few different things with it. Once I moved here in 2004. In 2012, I started the guide service. I was working as a marine biologist for a public aquarium, did both of them for a while. Left the job at the public aquarium and went full-time as a fishing guide.
And 2012 is when you started your guide service, if I caught that correctly, right? Yeah. And I love the way you said it was all downhill from there. I don't know. I think it's all uphill. I mean, saltwater fly fishing, like I started freshwater. This is a brand new game to me, and it is incredible. The different species. And along the Crystal Coast where you are, you have so many different species. But before we get to that, I was reading your bio a bit, and I want to point this out. First of all, thanks to you, you helped to start Project Healing Waters along the Crystal Coast, which, I mean, kudos, big undertaking, and also a great way to recognize our veterans who have served.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, and everybody probably has a different example of that, but I think most people in life are looking for something where they can give back. So like you go to church and they're like, hey, can you do this or that or whatever to lead? And I just, through things, nothing ever really hit me that it was something that I maybe had a skill in that I could teach somebody else. So when there was opportunity to start a program here on the Crystal Coast for Project Healing Waters, I was like, wow, I can give back to veterans, and I can do something I enjoy doing, which is fly fishing and fly tying and rod building and all that stuff. And it just kind of fell in my lap as a perfect match. And I was all about that. That was in 2013, so I was a year into guiding, but I'd been fishing up here for probably 8 or so years at that point, and that was it.
And it really is great. It's, I've done a lot with veterans here locally, and I think it's great to help those men and women who have served that are trying to kind of get back into, what would be normal from the horrors of war that they've seen, So thank you again for having that heart.
Yeah, the Project Healing Waters is an awesome program because, I can teach fly fishing to them or fly tying, things like that. And those are skills that, it's physical therapy, it's mental health therapy, but it's not categorized as that. It doesn't have that stigma of I'm going to see a therapist or I'm going to see a physical therapist. Like I'm doing something fun, but it's also helping me maybe with, nerve damage or, whatever. Like it's a calming activity. But the other part is that, I never served. So I can't talk to those guys about the things that they've been through, but it puts them in a room with 10 or 20 other guys who have been through the same thing. And
Yep.
now we're teaching them this new activity. And so they've got that camaraderie between people who understand those experiences, but now they've got this new sport they can do together. And then next thing you know, they're fishing on their own on weekends, like, they're them and their new buddy who maybe served somewhere overseas at the same time. So it's a fantastic program all around.
It really is. And you also took that one step further. You're on the board, and maybe you're not still, but you were part of the Cape Lookout False Albacore Fishing Festival, where the money raised also went to Project Healing Waters and to other veteran services. So really, I mean, you do a lot with veterans, which is great.
Well, I mean, I'm the Camp Lejeune, the second largest Marine base in the United States, is 2 miles from my front yard, the back
Right.
gate to it. So I don't hear it right now, but most nights we can hear the artillery blowing up out there and see the flares and stuff in the sky and hear the ospreys coming over. So, I mean, we're surrounded with military veterans here, and a lot of them that have disabilities. And the Albacore Festival, when we had a chance to do that, it was a couple of us. The Albacore Festival was it was done for, I think, cancer research like 10 years prior. Somebody else had the Albacore Festival, and it kind of just fallen away, and they weren't doing it anymore. And we got permission to kind of revive it,
Mhm.
but focus towards disabled veterans. So that was cool. I served on the board for 5 years, and then I kind of had to step away a little bit as my guiding got more busy, and I just didn't have as much time to dedicate to it. But that was great, getting the veterans out there fishing, doing fundraisers and stuff to get that money to help support Project Healing Waters and other veteran focused programs.
Yep. And so you said your guiding kind of started to really take off, and I want to kind of step into that realm now. As you said, you guide along the Crystal Coast. For those that don't know, where does that stretch? Is it Cape Lookout all the way through Emerald Isle? Is that kind of the whole Crystal Coast area?
Yeah, officially is Cape Lookout National Seashore, basically from the lighthouse and then all the way to the west to Swansboro. Swansboro is the last of it.
Okay.
Realistically, I got another probably 10 to 15 miles southwest of there down to New River, Topsail area. But most of the time I'm fishing somewhere between Swansboro and Cape Lookout. So Shackleford, Emerald Isle, Salter Path, Fort Macon, Atlantic Beach, that whole stretch.
And you have a lot of different species based on the time of year that you're chasing down there. So let's kind of start off where we are right now, and then we'll work our way back around the calendar. So we're heading into the middle of September, going into October. Is this prime false albi, or are you a little bit early in false albis and you're finishing up reds? Where are you at right now?
Well, so I would consider right now to be the beginning of our fall season. And I think if I had to pick one thing to be the deciding factor of when it's officially fall here, it's when we switch from a southwest wind and it's warmer and it's more humidity in the air to it switches to these northeast winds that we get. The air temperature starts to drop a little bit at night and in the morning.
Right.
And that's what kicks off the migration of a lot of the bait fish and a lot of the fish here. So we're kind of in that swing right now where we're going from inshore, we're going from like summertime redfish to more fall redfish, which is just, I mean, it's the same fish. They're just acting a little bit differently. And then it's also the arrival of more of the nearshore species. In the summertime, we've got Spanish mackerel, bluefish, jacks, and things like that off the beaches. But they start to come in more numbers. And then the false albacore start to arrive also this time of year. And that'll just continue to build over the next few months as more and more bait pours out the inlets. The northeast wind that's sending the bait out the inlets, that's what's ringing the dinner bell for everything from the redfish inshore that are getting hyped up right now on all the mullet and the menhaden and the shrimp that are gathering up, and then all the Spanish and the blues and the albies and everything that are feeding on silver sides and anchovies and things like that that are heading out the inlets along the beachfront right now.
So if I'm calling you up today and let's say I was lucky enough that you had an opening, let's say in the next couple of days, I really kind of have a smorgasbord of what to go for at this point in time.
Yeah, we would definitely have a conversation about options and see not just what fish you want to fish for most, but as I often have to do when I talk to my anglers, talk to them about, what their expectations are, what they want to get out of it, what their casting ability is, their experience level. And between all that, hopefully we can help them pick out what they want to do because honestly, if I could live over 2 or 3 months over and over and over again, revolving in the fishing season, I would just do September, October, November over and over again. So we're really entering the most prolific time of year to catch the most species. Now, there's some species that we target in the spring that aren't here right now,
Mhm.
but we have the overwhelming majority of options right now for the next few months.
So there's a couple of things with that. I'm going to bring up the one of the videos here that I kind of am looking at on your site, and I mean you're targeting redfish. They come from kind of the inshore, but then you're doing some flood tide redfish where they're in the grasses and all. And you named your guide service Tailing Tide because of exactly this. I mean, these redfish tail, and you love the challenge, and you love to put your clients in that challenge. It truly, to me, is one of the hardest fishing that there is because of the precision of the cast that is involved.
I think inshore redfish, technically, I mean, it's the most technical fishing, fly fishing we have in North Carolina. Unfortunately for me, having to deal, like I said, with expectations being the hardest thing as a guide to deal with, between things like this video we're looking at here on YouTube, I might film for an hour to get 2 minutes of footage that gives this thought process to a lot of people that, hey man, this stuff's easy, and they're all over the place. I've had people unfortunately step on my boat before and say, so they're just going to tail around us all day long, right? And I'm just going to throw a cast out and they're going to eat it. And I'm like, not today. They're not going to tail it all today. So, the tailing thing is fantastic, but it is highly technical.
Yep.
Any of the shallow water redfish is highly technical. It's often, most of the year, like in the summertime, it's not because of long casts. It's because a fish is going to show up 10 feet in front of you, 2 feet off your fly rod. He's going to be there for 2 seconds before he sees you. And the question is not, can I make a long cast? It's like, can I make a short cast very, very quickly without him noticing it? And that's why it is such a technical type of fishery.
And so as they move from the kind of the slightly deeper water, I don't want to really say deep, into wintertime, you're then chasing them into the back creeks, which are technically warmer, and then it's still that chase, and it's still that that difficulty because they can see you pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I try to, being a poling skiff guide and a mostly fly fishing guide, and we do also do some light tackle spin, but mostly fly fishing. I'm trying to fish them shallow year round. That can be tough in August when the water temps are in the low 90s and the fish don't want to be in a foot of water.
Right.
But whenever possible, I'm trying to get shallow so we can sight fish them. But yeah, once in that transition between summer to, which is warm, muddy water, bait is spread out, fish are spread out, a lot of shots at singles or pairs. If you're lucky, you might find a group, to fall where you started getting the water cleaning up a little bit and you start getting packs of 6 or a dozen reds together chasing groups of shrimp, to December, January, February, where now you're looking at schools of 100, 200, sometimes 500 fish and 10 inches of crystal clear water. It's actually all happens in the same general areas. They utilize certain ponds and bays and creeks seasonally that they may not in other parts of the times of the year. But I mean, it's all, within spitting distance of the other places. It's just knowing where they're going to go depending on those seasonal changes. In the wintertime, those fish, they need protection. They need food, and they need, and once they protection, places that dolphins and can't get into. They need some deep holes that they can slide off a flat so an osprey can't get them. They need enough food to keep them fed through the winter. And they don't need much because they've got a slow metabolism, but they need something to eat. And then they need warm areas. So they're looking for areas where that creek, for example, is going to be 2 degrees warmer than the rest of the creeks in the wintertime. So they have certain places they do utilize, and they'll make that move. Probably they're kind of still in their summer haunts now, but maybe like November, they're going to make that move into those winter haunts.
And are you able to chase redfish throughout the entire winter, or is there a point in the winter season where the water's just cold enough and you can see them, but they just have no ambition to chase a fly or to move for food?
So 42 degrees is the magic number, 42 degrees Fahrenheit for redfish. Below 42 degrees, they don't eat. They don't have the metabolism to be able to, being cold-blooded, to be able to digest their food. So they're still in the same places. They're just extremely lethargic.
Right.
Now, most winters, that's not an issue. You would have to have a freeze where we'd have snow on the ground or ice on the ground for a couple of days. Now that could drive the temperatures once it melts down into the 30s in the water. And those redfish may actually leave the marsh and they go out and sit in the surf for a couple of days
Gotcha.
because the water's more stable. They like it in the marsh in the winter because that sun's going to warm up 12 inches of water better than it's going to warm the ocean up. But it does drop and rise in temperature a lot. So if it gets too cold, they'll leave. But in general, maybe in the coldest parts of the winter, you may have those fish that you get out. If you get out there at 7 in the morning, maybe that water temp's 39 or 40 degrees and they're there and they're not eating, but you come back at 9 or 10 o'clock and it's 43 degrees and they're eating. And if you come at 1 o'clock and now it's 47 degrees, they're really happy and they're really chewing. So you've got to watch those water temps when you fish them in the winter.
And when you're guiding then in the winter, are you, because of the water temperatures and the air temperatures, are you making a little bit of a later start then for clients?
It's gentlemanly fishing. We usually don't start till 9 and we're done by 3. So it's 6-hour days. We not just the water temp being warmer, but it is 100% a sight fishery. There's no blind casting in the winter. It's the closest thing we have to bone fishing down in the Bahamas, except for the temperature. Those fish are silver in the winter. They're schooled up. They're on white sand flats and sometimes on muddy bottoms too. But sunshine is everything. So if you go out at 7 in the morning, the sun's still kind of low on the horizon. It's hard to sight fish them. And I've heard Simone say this before too. Like the problem with a school is like, it's great that you got all those fish, but it's like a flock of birds. If you don't see them and you bump into one, you've spooked that entire school. So we want to see those fish 200 feet before we ever get to them in the winter.
And so then talk about the client, right? How good are you looking for their cast to be? When I talked to Simone, you mentioned him. He's looking for minimum 60. He'd love 70, 80, which, I mean, can be difficult for an intermediate angler who wants to make that chase.
Yeah, so winter definitely takes a little bit better of a caster than summer does. In the summertime, if I've got a guy who can consistently throw 30 feet, but accurately and quickly, then we can sight fish in the summer because our water's generally tea colored to, like chocolate milk colored, and we're seeing them close. In the wintertime, we may be able to sit off of a school for an hour and kind of just work around them and follow them and pick off on them. If I've got a guy can only give me 30 feet, I'm going to find the position and the angle and the time, the opportunity is going to get him a fish.
Right.
But if I can sit 60 feet back from those fish, yeah, absolutely. Now we're staying out of there. They've got their bubble and we've got our bubble. And as long as our bubbles don't cross each other, then they're happy and we're happy and it works out. And, when we hook a fish in the wintertime, I'm pulling backwards as the guy's fighting the fish to get as far away from that school as possible so they don't feel or hear that fish being caught. And when we release it, then we'll go back in, we'll look at them and we'll set up again and go, okay, well, they're moving this way. Let's go sit over here and let them come to us.
So there's a gamesmanship in not only the physical cast, the chase, but then you're then thinking the next move. That's why you're backing out so that you don't disturb that pod to give that angler that next chance and maybe a following chance after that.
Yeah. And also just some, every day you learn, and every school you learn, they teach you. That's what's great in the wintertime is you can see those fish and how they react to your cast, to your presentation, to your strip. But in the wintertime, sometimes you can cast 5 feet in front of them and the school just rushes the fly. And then there's other times where you throw 20 feet from them and they get nervous from that. So now you're going, okay, we need to go longer leader, smaller fly. And then you watch them and you go, okay, they're bouncing from one oyster point to another point to another point, and they're triangulating back and forth. And you're almost going, okay, they're going away from this spot. Throw your cast there now, and let's just hold it for 30 seconds until they come back around. Sometimes it's almost setting a trap up for them in the wintertime versus actively like stalking and trying to cast to one fish, because sometimes their awareness level is so high in that clear water.
And so you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you. So as and I'm going to back up probably the timeline here. Do you go after singles? Because that is really difficult. I mean, as I've tried and failed miserably.
In the wintertime, it's very rare to see a single. Okay. In the wintertime, normally, you might find 6 fish. So I might say, hey, I've got a creek system that's got 1,000 redfish in it right now. Say it's January. And that doesn't mean I've got 1,000 fish in one school. Now, at some point during the week, they might get into a group of 1,000, but likely I've got maybe a big school of 200, and then a couple schools of 100, and then a few schools of 75 or 50. And then I've got several schools of 5 or 10 fish.
Gotcha.
So, we take them as it comes. Those fish do have the ability to be pressured too much in the winter, whether that's us fishing them too much or fishing them too hard or too often, and they will pack their bags and leave, which makes my job as a guide and a fisherman hard. Like, I want to come back each day and know where they're going to be. So when we go and we approach a school of redfish in the wintertime, I'm watching how they react to our approach. I'm watching how they react to our cast. We may catch maybe a school of 200 fish and we catch 3 of them. And by the time we've caught the third one, like, those fish are spooking as soon as the fly hits the water. We're leaving and going looking for another group. And maybe we're going to go find a group of 10 or 20, or maybe we just go somewhere different and find another group of 100. But it's sometimes having that big group. We had a couple trips this winter in late winter, March. So with the end of it, I had a couple days where we had 1,000 fish within 100 yards of us around us. And it was incredible. And we had a school of about 200, and we caught obscene numbers out of the school of 200. And when I say obscene numbers, probably in a 4 to 5 hour period, I had one fly angler land about 25 redfish.
That's an insane day.
It is an insane day. And when we left those fish, they still weren't getting spooked. They might shuffle, 20 yards down the bank. So right. We found fish that had not been pressured for several days before. Now, I could have very easily gone to another spot and found a similar sized group of fish that had been pressured for whatever reason for the couple of days before. And I could have placed one cast into them, and then they would have just freaked out, and I would have just left those fish and said, we're not fishing those today. So every school's different.
Every school is different, and I think that's what makes it so much fun, is the challenge, the chase, and really what you're going for. So when you're coming out of January and February, now you're going into March, the waters are warming up, the fish are leaving the creeks, and they're going into more of the marshy areas like we're seeing here.
So I'm quite honestly, I catch in the wintertime and the summertime, I'll catch redfish in the exact same places.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We'll catch them in bays. We will catch them in creeks. We will catch them on flats, the same ones in the summer and winter. Now, there are some creeks that hold fish really well in the winter that also hold them in the summer. And then there's some summer haunts that they're never in the winter. So, it doesn't, some of them you get them in both, some you only get them in the winter, some only in the summer, but it's very similar habitats. But the deal, especially in the winter, is they want places that have shallow enough entry points that bottlenose dolphin can't get in there and feed on them. Mm-hmm. They've got to have some deeper holes that like ospreys and eagles can't get over and get to them, things like that. So it's basically the same type of habitat. I mean, we're fishing them in summer or winter. We're fishing them in 6 to 24 inches of water.
Right.
And the biggest difference is in the wintertime, those places are crystal clear. In the summertime, they're much more stained up from rainfall and wind and things like that.
Gotcha. And then once you're coming out of winter, I know you start to shift your guide service a little bit, because you start to chase, you go to the Roanoke River and you go for shad and stripers. Talk a little bit about that program as well.
Yes. So just as the winter redfish fishery is kind of winding down and the bait's returning and the water's getting a little warmer and dirtier and the fish are starting to break up, that's when we have American or white shad along with hickory shad that enter the rivers in North Carolina. We've got 4 main rivers in North Carolina. We've got the Tar, we've got the Neuse, the Cape Fear, and the Roanoke, and they all have different amounts of American shad versus hickory. I go up and guide on the Roanoke around Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, and Weldon, North Carolina. It's about 100 miles upstream from the Albemarle Sound. Mm-hmm. And that's primarily hickory shad fishery, but it is an exceptional hickory shad fishery. That is one where you can go there and can't guarantee it, but you got a very high chance of catching 100 shad in 4 hours of shad fishing on fly. So, and you try to explain to people, hey man, you want to go do a charter for shad? And they're like, well, shad is catfish bait. But I mean, like, it's a 12 to 14 inch fish that fights in the current. It jumps, it eats like crazy. Yep. People love to go fish for a 10-inch rainbow trout, but they kind of stick their nose up at a shad. Shad are so much fun, and they're so user friendly.
They are very fun. We have a nice run of them here in the James, running right out of the ocean right up into Richmond, which is great, right to the fall line. So we get to play for them as well. It is enjoyable. Then we get a striper run, but I think the striper run that you get, we do get some hogs here, but I think you get them a little bit easier, so to speak.
Yeah. So the Roanoke River fishery, if you go to the town of Weldon, we're 95, just south of the Virginia state line. When you cross the Roanoke River, you'll see a big sign with a big striped bass hanging up above it, and it says rockfish. If people aren't familiar with it, rockfish is another local name for stripers. Rockfish capital of the world. And in the 90s, it was given that name because it was such a booming fishery. Unfortunately, like from most places on the East Coast of the United States, the striped bass fishery over the last 50 years has peaked and then plummeted and peaked and plummeted again. And we're at a point right now where most of the fisheries on the Atlantic coast for striped bass are kind of a little bit dwindling right now. And that's for multiple different reasons, and we could get into it. But the thing right now on the Roanoke River is there are still high numbers of striped bass, what we would call schoolies, your 18 to 24-inch fish. That's your standard fish you catch up there on the Roanoke. It's not unusual at all to catch some 28, 30, 32-inch striped bass. The problem with the fishery and what has, fisheries biologists concerned is we've got a lack of big female fish right now. So, those 30, 40, 50 pounders that used to be famous to be caught in the Chesapeake Bay in the 90s and in the Roanoke River and all over the place and up north, New Jersey and New York, there's not enough for those around. And it's just those year classes didn't make it, 20 years ago. So we're missing years of fish. So we got a lot of fish around, but there's been tighter regulations the last few years. They've completely turned it into a catch and release fishery on the Roanoke River, trying to get that population back up because we want lots of big females in the water, because if we don't have big females, we don't have babies to make more striped bass.
Right. And I mean, as a fly angler myself, and I think, you and probably most of your clients, I mean, yeah, we can catch in that slot, but we are always practicing catch and release for the future of our sport. And so I don't ever have a problem with releasing a fish. I think let somebody else catch it.
I did it completely by accident. I built a fishing guide service focused on fly fishing. When I started doing this, I started doing it because I was just looking for a weekend job. I'm going to run 25, 30 charters a year while I'm working a full-time state government job. We had a kid, we're trying to pay for daycare and go out to eat once a month. Right. So right. I said, what can I do that nobody else around here is doing? And I said, let me do fly fishing, and started with just redfish and then expanded from there. But what I did by accident was I formed a wonderful group of clientele. I'm probably 80 to 90% of my clients are repeat business. They just fish with me every year. And they could care less about harvesting a fish. I have no problem with legally harvesting fish. I have no problem with eating fish. But it's nice having those people that I don't even have to ask them, do you want to put it in the cooler? They just want to let the fish go. So, whether it's stripers on the Roanoke or, just my personal pet redfish that live here, right here on the Crystal Coast of my backyard, it's nice to know that they're all going back. And then when I go back again, that fish is still going to be in the water. So it may have happened by accident, but I'm very, very fortunate. North Carolina several years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, they basically closed down our flounder fishery. So if I was a guide that, half of my income came from taking people to harvest and take home and eat flounder, right, I would have lost half my business. So very fortunate. I'm kind of protected from those issues because I have clients that want to go just for the enjoyment of the hunt of the fish.
Yep. But as you said earlier, there have been, and I think there will be even more tighter regulations on the striped bass fishery to bring back those large hens that we need to really get this population back, because I mean, it is a dwindling resource, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the good news is that over the years, the wildlife organizations, they have found that striped bass respond very well to regulations and things like that to protect them. They rebound pretty quickly. So we know that from the past, that by doing this, And hopefully nothing else is affecting that population too much, that they will rebound. And hopefully, I hate to say it, if it takes 10 more years, then so be it.
Right.
Let's get a good fishery, and let's learn from it and keep it good.
Coming out of striped bass season, which does that end for you in like April? Is that when you kind of shut it down, or do you go into
So
May?
the shad start showing up first or second week of March, and
Right.
they taper out the beginning of April. And as they're starting to leave the river mid-April, the stripers are starting to come up. The end of April can be fantastic on the Roanoke for the stripers. They're generally spawning pretty hard the first 2 weeks of May, once the water temp's pushing around 70 degrees,
Right.
and they start to drop out of the river somewhere between like May 10th and May 15th, and they start to go back downstream. So I'm usually up there the end of April or the beginning of May.
And then you're switching back to the Crystal Coast and you're starting to chase. And I said this wrong in our pre-discussion there. You're chasing bonito, not bonita.
Yeah. So actually, and that's so when I come up and I do the shad in March and I come back, the usually April's kind of my focus is on near shore. So I do come back from shad, I do near shore for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I go back to the Roanoke to do stripers. So generally the first week or so of April is when the Atlantic bonito show up, and the bluefish show up first. Sometimes some false albacore come through a little bit in the spring. They show up with the bluefish first when the water temp's like 55 degrees. When that water temp hits 60, the Atlantic bonito show up. And then when the water temp gets closer to 70, the Spanish show up. And when all that's going off and really peaking, I end up leaving to go fish the stripers. So unfortunately, I have to leave those bonito and to go fish for stripers that I've got scheduled. Interestingly enough, this spring, we also had some of the biggest albacore I'd seen in 4 or 5 years showed up in April, along with those bonito. And then also we had big, 40 to 50 plus inch bull redfish that showed up with them, and sharks. And it was as good as it is in the fall. And we had a little bit of that in the spring. So you never know what April will bring. But yeah, I'll do striped bass. And then when I come back, basically when I come back from stripers, all that near shore stuff is kind of moved on. And then it's Spanish mackerel, bluefish, and redfish for the next few months.
And that takes you all the way back around, and we've done the whole calendar again.
Yeah.
So I want to talk quickly about equipment. You have been making your own fly rods. Let's talk a little bit about that and what weight fly rods are you using to go after different species of fish. Are you using a 7 or an 8 for reds? Are you using a 9? What are you? And tell me about the rods you're building too.
Yes, 2017, as I was making that transition to going completely full time as a guide. I also was just thinking about long term. I do a laborious job where I'm push bowling a boat around for 6-8 hours a day, and I was trying to decide, like, is that my retirement plan, to be 80 years old still push bowling a boat around? And so I started the rod company. So it's USA made. They're production rods, but it's just like a small batch thing. So long term, hopefully, maybe I'm building more rods than I am running charters when I'm in my 60s and 70s, and I've got a little bit more backache and knee pain than I currently have. So we got a couple different series, and we build them right here in Swansboro, and we got everything from 3 weights up to 12 weights. As far as what I'm fishing, when I got really focused into guiding, I went from having rods in every single weight, odd and even, to trying to simplify things. And I have a couple 4s, I have a couple 6s, I've got a bunch of 8s, I've got several 10s, and I got a handful of 12s. And that just helps me because for every fly rod I've probably got 3 or 4 different lines for it. So it just helps me keep track of what's going on. This standard, most people come up and fish with, is an 8 weight. I keep 8 weights for redfish in the summer and the winter, although you could get away with the 6 or 7. Most of my anglers aren't used to, especially if they're like a trout angler, they're not as used to casting in the wind, casting big, bulky, wind resistant flies and poppers and things like that. So generally 8 weights for the redfish. When we get into albie season, which we're getting into right now, which is my busiest time of the year, I don't have a day off. Starting next week, I don't have a day off until December 1st. Wow. So once we get in, it's popular. And so if you really understand how to fight a fish in the correct angles without breaking a rod, you could get away with 8 weights, even 9 weights. I just put 10 weight rods in the fall in my customers' hands. because I found if I give them 10 weights for the next 2 or 3 months, I have less broken rods
Yep.
at the end of the fall season than if I give them 8 weights. Those fish are unbelievable, and there's no loss of enjoyment of fight catching them on a 10 weight. The problem is you don't know when you're going to catch a 6-pound albacore and then hook a 26-pound albacore. So, you got to buckle up and be ready for whatever shows up.
Exactly right. You sure do. Let me just bring this back up here. While you were talking, I was showing MauserFlyFishing.com, which is the place to take a look at the different fly rods and different weight selections that John builds. And you can read more about the story there. Again, it's MauserFlyFishing.com. And I don't want to skip over this, by the way, John. It's Tailing Tide Guide Service.com is your main website. I was showing this too when you were talking about the different trip options from the Crystal Coast inshore all the way through the Roanoke River. And then you do kid trips, you do eco tours. So you do something that's fun for everybody that's even not so much fishing related at times, or making it easier for kids as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love kid trips. And I mean, that can be, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and we may be just the adventure of it. It's a 2 or 3 hour fishing trip. And instead of just doing it off a dock, we're going to go through the whole production of putting them in the boat and motoring them over. And maybe we're just tying up under the bridge and catching black sea bass and puffer fish, but they're going to really have a good time with it. So I love doing those types of things. The most recent thing I took on a couple of years ago is I started doing canoe fly fishing trips.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put somebody on the front of the canoe, and we just go take it back to the old school days and go fish popping bugs for bass and bluegill. And I sit in the back of the canoe, and, we may take 3 hours to work a half a mile of shoreline or a quarter mile of shoreline, because we're hitting every nook and cranny. But I love the variety, and I love changing it up. It's cool as redfish are. Yeah. When you do it 90 days in a row, like sometimes it's nice to paddle a canoe around or do an eco tour or take some kids fishing.
And I think you're right. You even want a little bit of a break for a day or two. And we all started, at least I did, chasing bluegill, right? Like throwing something out there, because bluegill eat anything, and they're fun as anything to catch. It just makes it, they're a great fish, really are.
They're fantastic. A 40-pound amberjack and a hand-sized bluegill, to me, both eating on top water, mm-hmm. I think they're both equally as fun. Like right. It's nice to have the variety of all the different opportunities we have here.
Yep.
But my gosh, I love, when you go paddle a canoe up in some swamp and go catch bluegill, like you don't see another person for the whole day too. And you're moving very slow. So like, it's just like pulling a skiff. It's like you're seeing everything. You're at eye level with the ferns growing on the cypress trees and the snake crawling along the bank and all that stuff. So it's just a different way to immerse yourself in the outdoors. And I'm thankful that we have all those opportunities.
Let's talk a little bit more about your guide service. So if I'm a client and interested in hiring you, what is the first thing I should do? I should probably drop you an email and say, hey, John, I'm interested in coming in October. And you're going to tell me what's your level? What's the conversation like?
Yeah. An email or a phone call, or maybe both. I don't have a setup on the website where somebody can just come book me for something, because that's how people end up being disappointed without having a conversation first. So yeah. What do you want to do? What do you want to get out of this?
Right.
Do you have a thing in mind that you want to do? Have you considered trying to do this? What have you done similar to this in the past? Like, if I got a guy who's like, I've never fished for redfish, but I've done bonefish and permit, then I go, okay, well, that's different than I've never fished for redfish, and I've only fished for trout in Alaska. Like that's a different type of customer. Right. And I may go, hey, like we've got the redfish are really impressive right now, but they're super technical. We may be working all day for 1 or 2 fish, mm-hmm. In the summertime, maybe it's a dozen shots and 1 or 2 fish, or we can go out on the beach and maybe Spanish and blues aren't quite as big or as impressive, but we can catch 30 of them on fly, and you're going to be hooked up all day on your first saltwater trip. So all those different conversations. And I also leave it open. Like I'll find out if they have a backup plan for something, because weather and bite might change our mind. If they book me a month or 2 in advance, like we may get to the week of and we go, man, I don't know if that what we said was going to work, but this is really good right now. So do you want to consider this or not?
Gotcha. And I think one of the things that you have to do, especially if someone is coming from, a trout or bass background, is to temper those expectations. As you said, you may chase redfish all day and have 3 shots, maybe one hookup, depending on, because it's so technical, where if you go smallmouth bass fishing, you may land 30, 40, 50 fish. It is not the same fishery.
It's not at all. I mean, the only thing that's similar is you've got a fly rod in your hand. Everything else is different about the two types of fishing. When the anglers used to trout fishing or even bass fishing, they're putting a fly out there in a riffle or some nook and cranny where there's always three fish in there, and they're just letting that fly drift through there, or they're stripping it through there. They know they're going to be there. When you come to the saltwater world, all of a sudden you are now hunting and stalking, and you are looking for a fish that is also hunting and stalking food, and you're trying to slide in. And it's like if I was getting ready to grab a steak and somebody's trying to slide a piece of pizza in front of me and not freak me out, but get me to eat it. It's a completely different world. And like, you've got to be on your toes when you get that shot. If you have a shot, you've got to take that shot. The paralysis by analysis does not work in the saltwater world. You've got to be on your toes, have your head on a swivel constantly. And, sometimes you get shots every 10 minutes, but sometimes you're sitting there for 3 hours, and here comes your fish all of a sudden, and you got 5 seconds to make it happen. And it's so much different than drifting a fly down a river in the mountains somewhere.
Yeah, it's completely different. And then don't do the typical mistake that many of us do, which is trout set. Make sure you strip set.
That's right. But I tell everybody at the beginning of the trip, don't trout set. I know you're going to do it anyway, but I'll tell you now, and I'll tell you again when you do it, don't do it. And then I'll go to the point where I'll talk about, okay, when you are supposed to strip strike and you still trout set anyway, this is what I need you to do next to make sure the hook is actually in the fish's mouth, because there's nothing more disappointing than working, putting all your effort in, finally getting that shot, actually getting the cast right, feeding that redfish or whatever, albie or whatever, and getting what you thought was a good hook set based on freshwater fishing perspective. And you get 20 seconds of celebration until that fish does the first head shake, and then everything goes loose. Yeah. And then the heads drop. So that's really tough.
And the worst part is, as the client, my head dropping and then turning around to the corner and looking at you, and your head, and you're doing this. I'm not that you would do it, but
No, I'm saying, no worries, man. We'll get the next one. There's gonna be another one right up around the corner, and I'm going, oh gosh, please let there be a next one.
Right, please. Right. I pushed for 3 miles. We saw one. I got it.
That's right.
So once a client books with you, what does he or she need to bring with them? Should they bring their own fly rods? I know you have your own. How do you look at that and what else should they bring?
Totally up to them. Half of my clients bring their own rods and half of them don't. I do, if they want to bring it and they're probably maybe less experienced, I do want to talk to them about what they have, just to make sure that they're bringing the right thing. Mm-hmm. Say, for example, they're going to fish albies with me. Intermediate lines with shooting heads do much better punching into that northeast wind in the fall. And if they're coming, with a 9 or 10 weight and they're coming with a 7 or 8 weight in a floating line, I'm going to have a conversation with them. And sometimes it's, hey, I know you really love your fly rod that you spent a bunch of money on. How about I just loan you one of my lines? So I'll try to take notes on all that stuff just to try to give them the best opportunity, but without taking that joy of them being able to catch it on their own equipment. I have everything they need, from the fishing license to the gear to drinks and snacks and all that stuff. But if they've got a favorite fishing lure or a rod or reel or something that they really want to put that fish on, then by all means, I'll do everything I can to make sure that works out for them. Maybe I time a leader because they're not happy with their leader, but they've got the rod and reel and line, things like that.
Right. And then how long in advance, like you just said, you're about to start from Sunday to December 1, you are completely booked. How long in advance should I have that conversation with you? 6 months, a year? You said 80 to 90% of your clientele is repeat clientele.
Yeah, it's seasonal. So the problem, fall is my busiest season, and I'm thankful that I've been able to advertise myself, I guess, as an albacore guide well enough that people call me now. We've basically got fish that are here for 2.5, 3 months, and people know they've got such a small window. Whereas a redfish you can catch 12 months a year, those albies are such a short time span. So I've got like some guys that come and fish with me from Washington State. They fish 10 days every year. When they fish with me in October, they're going to book me for October of 2026. So by the time I get done with the fall season, I'm already 50, 60% booked for the next, and within a few months, I'm completely booked. Now, if somebody called me 2 weeks ago, the week of for redfish, I probably could still find them something in the summertime for redfish.
Mhm.
Or I've always got something last minute open for stripers. Even like while I'm there fishing stripers, I'm still going to have a half day or two open. So it just depends on the seasonality. I only fish albies in the fall for the most part. That's not because we don't have a fantastic redfish fishery here in the fall, because it's probably the best redfish fishery we have is during the fall here.
Right.
But all the albie guys have already booked all those days before the redfish fishermen call me to book those days. So it just depends on it. Albies, the sooner the better.
Yep.
Everything else, I would say, a month to 2 or 3 months out is plenty of time to get prime tides and things like that.
Gotcha. Very good. John, first of all, again, I want to thank you for your time today talking about your different species that you chase and the different areas that you go. It's been a very enjoyable conversation and very informative conversation. And I got to say, I feel lucky because when I hooked up with you, you allowed me to bring my own fly rod and line, and I had 9-weight floating line, and you were like, Maddie, I'll give you a shot, but we'll see what happens. And I did hook up, so I was very fortunate. And I didn't trout set.
We had a heck of a day. We got a really good surprise that day, didn't we?
Oh my! So we should talk about this. So we were with my friend Todd. He's my guest. We went out with you. I mean, first of all, you said normally it's kind of like a 7 to 2, 7 to 3 day. I think you stayed out with us until about 5:30 at night. I mean, you really went. I know. I'm sorry. You were unbelievable. I mean, like, kudos to you. But I think, I was like looking at the whole thing, and you and Todd are looking off in the distance, and you're looking at birds, right? Because that's where the bait is. And you saw this monster, and you went hammering out. You're like, Matt, sit. I sat, and all of a sudden, we pulled up to an area, and from a distance, you go, oh, it's shark. And then you were like, no, bull reds, bull reds, bull reds. You're like, grab that. And in the picture, let me see if I can pull the picture up really quickly here. Oh my God, it was incredible. Let me go back, stripers. I mean, that was insane.
And I'm trying to call on the radio and talk in secret code to the other 4 or 5 guides that
Right.
I want to help get out there that are a mile away without letting the whole fleet know what we're on. So yeah, you never know what's going to pop up. And they didn't hang around for long either, did they? They were on the surface long enough to get hooked up and fight them, and then the whole school vanished on us.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had this shot. I mean, it took us a bit to land these size reds, right? Obviously. And then you did have somebody else that said, I think they're over here. And we went motoring over there. And by the time we got there, they had hooked up, and then the school just bye. And it was like, well, that was super, like, the coolest thing I've seen. It was just incredible. So yeah.
You spend enough days out there, you see some amazing stuff every once in a while.
It really is amazing. So hang out for one quick second, John, for me, please. Again, I've been talking with John Mauser of Tailing Tide Guide Service. It's tailingtideguideservice.com. Again, he fishes the Crystal Coast of North Carolina. It's light tackle and fly, predominantly fly. So many different waters to choose from, and so many different options in terms of the types of fishery, from redfish to false albies to bonito. Of course, you'll run into the bull reds, and then in the spring, he's doing shad and he's doing stripers on the Roanoke River. Just an amazing fishery for sure. Again, this has been Off the Hook with Matty D. Thank you so much for joining us. We will have another show dropping in a week. Again, contact John Mauser at tailingtideguideservice.com. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with Matty D.